The great hall of the palace was filled with thousands of guests. Golden light fell from crystal lamps that floated in the air. Music played softly from instruments that needed no hands to play them. It was a royal wedding, and yet Princess felt like she was attending her own funeral. She stood at the altar in a dress made of starlight and silver threads. Her skin was pale blue, like all people, and her 4 arms were decorated with golden rings. She was beautiful by any standard in the galaxy. She was also very, very angry. Her groom had not yet arrived. They were a proud race. They had conquered dozens of star systems. Their warriors were feared across known space. Their technology was advanced beyond most species. And now, because of a peace treaty her father had signed, was being married to a human. A human, the thought made her sick. Humans were weak creatures from a small planet called Earth. They had only 2 arms. They could not see in the dark. They lived short lives and died easily. They had almost gone to war with them 5 years ago, but somehow the humans had convinced her father to sign a peace treaty instead. Part of that treaty was this marriage. The doors of the great hall opened. The crowd fell silent. A man walked in alone. He wore simple black clothes with no decoration. He was tall for a human, with black hair cut short and a face that showed no emotion at all. He carried nothing except a long black case strapped to his back. This was her future husband. Watched him walk toward her. He did not smile. He did not wave to the crowd. He did not even look nervous. He just walked step by step like a man walking to complete a simple task. Her brothers stood near the altar. The eldest laughed quietly. "Look at him," he whispered. "He walks like a servant, not a prince." The younger brother shook his head. "Earth insults us. They send us their garbage." Said nothing. She kept her face still and proud, even as shame burned inside her chest. Reached the altar and stood beside her. He was taller than she expected. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and when he looked at her she felt something strange. It was like being watched by a deep, quiet lake. There was no anger in those eyes, no fear, no hope, just stillness. The priest began the ceremony. He spoke the ancient words of tradition. He asked if he would honor this union, protect his wife, and serve the empire. Did not speak, he simply nodded. The crowd whispered, was this human mute? Was he stupid? Did he not understand the question? The priest looked uncomfortable but continued. He asked the same questions. She answered correctly, her voice clear and cold. And just like that, they were married. The celebration that followed was grand and expensive but felt none of the joy. She sat at the high table and watched her new husband eat small bites of food in silence. He did not speak to anyone. He did not dance. He did not laugh at the jokes told by noble guests. He simply sat there, still and quiet like a statue. Her father, Emperor, approached her during the feast. He was an old with gray skin and tired eyes. "I know this is difficult," he said softly, "but this marriage keeps the peace. Earth demanded it, and we need time to rebuild our fleets." "You have sold me for time," replied bitterly. "I have given you a duty," her father corrected. "Fulfill it." He walked away and was left alone with her silent husband. That night, servants led them to their shared quarters. The rooms were large and beautiful, with windows that looked out at 3 moons hanging in the purple sky. Stood by the window and refused to look at. "Why did you agree to this?" she finally asked. "What does Earth gain from sending you here?" She heard movement behind her, then a soft tap on her shoulder. She turned and saw holding a small tablet. Words glowed on its screen. "I go where I am needed." Stared at him. "You cannot speak." He shook his head slowly. He touched his throat and made a cutting gesture. Something had happened to him, something that took his voice. "So Earth sends me a mute husband," said, her voice sharp. "A man who cannot even speak at his own wedding. This is their idea of respect." His expression did not change. He typed again on his tablet. "I am sorry I am not what you wanted, but I am what I am." Laughed bitterly. "And what are you exactly? A farmer? A clerk? What skills do you have that made Earth choose you for this great honor?" Looked at her for a long moment, then he typed one word. "Patience." He turned and walked to the far side of the room. He sat down on a simple mat on the floor, crossed his legs and closed his eyes. The long black case lay beside him, unopened. Watched him for an hour. He did not move. He did not open his eyes. He simply sat there, breathing slowly like a monk in meditation. She went to bed angry and confused. In the days that followed, ignored her husband. She attended court functions alone. She ate meals without him. She pretended he did not exist. Her brothers laughed at her situation openly. Other nobles whispered behind her back. The princess who married a silent human. The princess who fell so low. And through it all said nothing. He woke early each morning and meditated with the black case beside him. He ate little. He slept less. He followed at a distance when she left their rooms, always staying in the shadows, never speaking, never complaining. She began to hate him for his silence, but more than that, she began to wonder about him. What was in that case he never opened? What had happened to his voice? And why, when she looked into his still, dark eyes, did she feel like she was only seeing the surface of something much deeper? She did not know it yet, but her questions would soon be answered, and the answers would change everything. 3 months passed since the wedding. The purple leaves of the palace gardens turned gold and began to fall, had settled into a routine of ignoring her husband, and had settled into a routine of being ignored. They lived in the same rooms but existed in different worlds. Then strange things began to happen. It started with dinner. Sat in the royal dining hall with her family, eating a traditional meal of spiced meat and sweet fruit. Sat beside her as always, silent, eating almost nothing. Halfway through the meal, a servant brought a special drink. It was her favorite, a warm tea made from flowers that grew only on the northern mountains. She lifted the cup to her lips, then she felt his hand on her arm, gentle but firm. She turned to look at him. His face was calm, but his eyes were different, sharp, alert. He took the cup from her hand and set it down on the table. Then he typed on his tablet. "Do not drink this." "Why not?" asked annoyed. Did not answer. He simply stood up, took the cup and walked out of the dining hall. Everyone watched him go with confused expressions. Later that night, found him in their quarters. He was sitting by the window, staring at the moons. "What was wrong with the tea?" she demanded. He typed his answer. "Poison, slow acting, would have killed you in 3 days." "Felt cold, how do you know?" "I know poison." She wanted to ask more questions, but he closed his eyes and returned to his meditation. She did not sleep well that night. A week later was walking on her favorite balcony, looking at the sunset over the capital city. The railing was made of carved stone, beautiful and ancient. She leaned against it, feeling the cool breeze on her face. The stone cracked. Felt herself falling forward toward the long drop below. Fear shot through her body. She screamed. Then strong hands caught her and pulled her back. She fell onto the balcony floor, breathing hard, her heart racing. Stood over her, his face still calm. Behind him, the broken railing fell away into the darkness below. He helped her stand. She was shaking. "The railing," she whispered, "it just broke." Walked to where the railing had been. He bent down and examined the broken stone. Then he typed on his tablet. Someone cut it, waited for you to lean on it." 2 attempts on her life in 1 week. Someone wanted dead. She reported the incidents to her father, but Emperor seemed distracted. There were rumors of trouble in the outer systems. Noble families were angry about the peace treaty with Earth. Some said the Emperor had grown weak. "I will increase your guards," her father promised, but he looked tired and worried about other things. That night could not sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about who wanted her dead. Was it the nobles who hated the human treaty? Was it someone who wanted to hurt her father through her? A sound woke her at midnight, soft footsteps outside her window. She sat up slowly. Moonlight filled the room with silver shadows. She saw standing by the window, perfectly still, looking out at the garden below. Then he moved. It happened so fast that barely understood what she saw, opened the window and jumped out. They were on the third floor. She ran to the window and looked down. 3 dark figures lay on the ground below. They were dressed in black, carrying weapons. They were not moving. Stood among them, calm as always. He looked up at and raised one finger to his lips. Then he typed on his tablet and held it up for her to see. "Go back to sleep." She did not go back to sleep. She sat by the window and watched him drag the bodies into the shadows. She watched him clean a short blade she had never seen before, a knife that had been hidden somewhere in his simple clothes. His movements were smooth and practiced, like someone who had done this many times. In the morning, palace guards reported finding 3 dead intruders in the gardens. Cause of death unknown. No witnesses. Said nothing about what she had seen. But now she watched her husband differently. She noticed things she had missed before. The way servants avoided his eyes. The way even her warrior brothers seemed uncomfortable near him. The way crowds parted slightly when he walked through them, as if people sensed something dangerous without knowing why. She noticed how he always positioned himself between her and doorways. How his eyes moved constantly, checking windows, counting guards, mapping exits. How he never sat with his back to an open space. One evening, she found him alone in their quarters. He was sitting with the black case beside him, as always. She sat down across from him. "What are you?" she asked directly. He opened his eyes and looked at her. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he typed on his tablet. "Your husband." That is not an answer. It is the only answer that matters. She leaned forward. 3 men tried to kill me last night. You killed them with a knife. You moved like nothing I have ever seen. You knew about the poison before anyone else. You knew the railing was cut." She paused. "Earth did not send me a simple man. They sent me something else. I want to know what." Studied her face. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Something that might have been respect. He typed slowly. "I am a man who keeps promises. I promise to protect you. That is what I do." "Protect me from what?" "From everything." Felt a shiver run down her spine. Not from fear, but from something else. For the first time since her wedding, she felt something other than anger toward this silent human. She felt curious. "The black case," she said. "What is inside it?" Looked at the case beside him. He placed his hand on it gently, almost lovingly. "A promise," he typed. "One I hope I never have to keep." He would not say more. But that night, for the first time, did not sleep on the opposite side of the room from him. She moved her bed closer to where he sat, close enough to hear his slow, steady breathing. If someone wanted her dead, at least she now knew she had a protector. A silent, mysterious, deadly protector who hid his secrets behind dark eyes and a sealed black case. She still had many questions, but she was beginning to understand that some answers were better discovered slowly. War came to the Empire like a storm breaking over calm waters. It started with whispers and ended with fire. His cousin, Lady, had always been ambitious. She was a skilled politician with many powerful friends. She believed Emperor had grown weak by signing peace with the humans. She believed the Empire needed stronger leadership. Her leadership. On the first day of winter, declared rebellion. 3 star systems followed her. Dozens of noble families pledged their fleets to her cause. Within a week, the Empire was at war with itself. Watched the reports come in with growing fear. Battles in space, cities burning, soldiers dying. The Empire that had stood for 1,000 years was tearing itself apart. Her father called her to the throne room. He looked older than she had ever seen him. His silver hair had turned white. His 4 hands trembled as he spoke. "I am sending you to the front lines," he said. "Not to fight, to inspire. The soldiers need to see the royal family standing with them. They need hope." Nodded, "I understand, father." "Take your husband with you," the emperor added. "He may be human, but he is family now. Let the troops see that we are united." So traveled to the war. Her ship carried her to a planet called Broken Sky, where loyal forces were fighting against rebels. Came with her, silent as always, carrying the black case on his back. The battle was not going well. Rebel ships filled the sky. Explosions shook the ground. Transport flew low over the fighting, heading for a command base where she would meet with generals and boost morale. They never reached the base. A missile hit their ship. The world became fire and spinning metal, screamed as the transport broke apart around her. She felt herself falling through smoke and flame. Then darkness. She woke up on the ground. Her body hurt everywhere. Blood ran down her face. She was lying in the wreckage of the transport, surrounded by twisted metal and burning fuel. Was beside her. He was injured too. A cut on his forehead, burns on his arms, but he was alive and moving. He helped her stand. They were in a valley between 2 hills. The transport had crashed far from the battle lines. Smoke rose from the wreckage into the gray sky. Then heard voices, many voices. She looked up and saw soldiers coming down the hills, dozens of them. They wore the red armor of rebel forces. They were surrounded. Pushed behind him. He faced the approaching soldiers with his usual calm expression. He was one man against an army. He had no weapon visible except the black case on his back. The rebel soldiers laughed as they came closer. Their leader, a tall with scars on his face, pointed at. "Look at this, a human protecting a princess," he laughed again. "Earth sends us their weakest, kill him first, make it slow." Did not move. He did not show fear. He simply reached over his shoulder and took hold of the black case. For the first time since had known him, he opened it. Inside was a sword. It was long and black, made of metal that seemed to drink in the light around it. Strange patterns moved across the blade like living shadows. When lifted it, the air itself seemed to vibrate. The rebel soldiers stopped laughing. Something about the sword made them uneasy. Even the leader took a step back. "What is that?" whispered. Did not answer, he could not answer. But he looked at her one last time and she saw something new in his eyes. Not calm, not stillness. Sadness, deep, ancient sadness. Then he moved. Had seen warriors fight. She had watched military displays and combat training. She thought she knew what battle looked like. She was wrong. Moved like water flowing through stones. He moved like wind passing through leaves. He moved in ways that should not be possible for any living creature. The rebel soldiers fired their plasma rifles. The shots missed, not because dodged them, but because he was simply not there when they arrived. He was already past them, behind them, through them. The black sword cut through everything. Armor meant nothing. Energy shields meant nothing. The blade passed through them like they were made of smoke. Soldiers fell without understanding what had happened to them. Did not fight like a man fighting enemies. He moved like a farmer cutting wheat. Each motion was smooth and efficient. Each strike was exact. There was no wasted movement, no wasted energy. In 90 seconds, it was over. 47 rebel soldiers lay on the ground. Some were dead. Some would never fight again. The black sword hummed softly in his hand, still hungry for more. He stood among the fallen bodies, breathing slowly. Not a single drop of blood touched his clothes. Not a single new wound marked his skin. Stared at him, her mouth was open. Her hands were shaking. She could not understand what she had just seen. Turned to her. The sadness was still in his eyes. He sheathed the black sword and held out his hand. She took it. His fingers were warm and steady. She was trembling, he was not. "What are you?" she whispered. It was the same question she had asked before, but now it meant something different. Typed on his tablet with one hand, while holding hers with the other. I am what Earth made me to be. I am what I chose to become. I am the promise I made long ago. What promise? He paused, then typed more words. To be strong enough to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Rescue ships found them an hour later, told no one exactly what had happened. She said they survived the crash. She said the rebels found them. She said the rebels were dead when rescue arrived. She did not say how they died. She did not mention the black sword. But she held his hand the entire flight back to safety. And for the first time since their wedding, she looked at him not with anger or confusion. She looked at him with wonder. What had Earth sent her? What was this silent man with the killing blade? She was beginning to understand that her husband was not her punishment. He was her gift. News of the crash spread through both armies, but it was not the crash that people talked about. It was what came after. Survivors from forces told stories. Stories of a human with a black sword. Stories of a man who moved like a ghost and killed like a god. Stories of 47 trained soldiers falling in less than 2 minutes. At first, no one believed the stories. Humans were weak. Humans were soft. Humans could not do such things. Then more stories came. Soldiers who had seen the human from a distance. Officers who had counted the bodies. Doctors who had examined the wounds and could not explain what weapon had made them. Within a week, the entire empire was talking about the human called death. Rebel soldiers began to desert. They refused to fight if the princess was nearby. They said the human would come for them. They said his sword could cut through anything. They said he could not be killed. Ordered her generals to find this human and destroy him, but no one wanted the job. Meanwhile, returned to the imperial capital with. The war continued, but she was no longer just a princess. She was the woman who had survived the impossible, and her silent husband was now the most feared man in the galaxy. Her father called her to his private chambers. He was not alone. A human man in a gray suit sat with him. The man had calm eyes and neat hair. He introduced himself as ambassador from Earth. "We need to talk about your husband," the ambassador said. He placed a tablet on the table. On the screen was a file with a single word at the top. "Classified." "What is this?" asked. "The truth," the ambassador replied. The truth about why Earth sent him to you." Read the file. With each word, her understanding of her husband changed. Was not a simple man chosen for a political marriage. He was the last member of an ancient order. For hundreds of years, Earth had trained warriors in secret. They learned fighting arts that had been perfected over generations. They learned to control their bodies in ways that seemed impossible. They learned to become weapons. When humanity reached the stars and found peaceful ways to solve problems, the order was disbanded. Its members went into normal lives. The old ways were forgotten. All except. He had trained since childhood. He had mastered every technique. And when the order ended, he refused to let the old ways die. He continued practicing alone, keeping alive knowledge that was thousands of years old. The black sword had a name. It was called the Ending Blade. It was made of materials that scientists still did not fully understand. The metal came from a dying star. The process to forge it had been lost centuries ago. It could cut through any known substance or energy field. There were only 3 ending blades in existence. Carried 1. The other 2 were locked in vaults on Earth, guarded day and night. "We did not send to be just a husband," Ambassador explained. "We sent him as insurance." Insurance, felt anger rising in her chest. "You mean a weapon?" "Yes, if the treaty had failed, if they had decided to attack Earth instead of making peace." The ambassador paused. "One man with that sword could do more damage than a fleet of warships. We needed you to know that attacking us would cost more than you could pay." So my marriage was a threat. Your marriage was a promise, the ambassador corrected. A promise that Earth would never attack first, and a promise that if we were attacked, we would respond with everything we had. Stood up, her 4 hands were shaking with anger. Get out, both of you now. Her father started to speak, but she silenced him with a look. The ambassador left quietly. Her father followed, his head bowed. Found in their quarters, he was sitting by the window, watching the sunset. The ending blade lay beside him in its case. She threw the tablet at him. It bounced off his shoulder and clattered to the floor. You lied to me, she said. Her voice was cold. You were never my husband. You were always a weapon, a threat held against my people. Picked up the tablet and read it. His face showed no emotion. When he finished, he typed on his own device. Everything in that file is true. So you admit it. You came here to frighten us, to make sure we behaved. He typed again. That is why they sent me. It is not why I came. What does that mean? Stood up slowly. He walked to a small chest in the corner of the room. He opened it and pulled out a worn piece of cloth. He brought it to and placed it in her hands. It was a medical bandage, old and stained, but she could still see the markings on it, medical symbols, a hospital name, a date from 8 years ago. He typed while she examined the bandage. 8 years ago, pirates attacked a refugee colony. I was there. I was not a soldier then, just a traveler, but I fought. I protected the civilians. I killed many pirates. He paused, then continued typing. One of them cut my throat. I should have died, but a doctor found me. Her name was. She worked for 3 days and 3 nights to save my life. She gave me blood from her own body. She rebuilt my throat as best she could. She saved me even though I was human, even though she did not have to. Looked at the bandage, at the name written on it, a name. I cannot speak because of what happened that day, but I am alive because of what your people did for me. When Earth asked for volunteers for this marriage, I stepped forward, not because I wanted to be a weapon, because I wanted to repay a debt. He typed his final words. I was sent as a weapon. I chose to be a shield. There is a difference. Sat down slowly. She was still angry, but something else was growing inside her. Understanding, respect, maybe even trust. Why did you not tell me this before? She asked. He typed simply. You did not want to know me. I waited until you did. She looked at this strange, silent man. This human who carried a sword that could end wars. This husband who had protected her without asking for thanks or recognition. What happens now? She asked. He typed one last answer. That depends on you. I will be whatever you need me to be. A weapon, a shield, a husband, or nothing at all. The choice is yours. Thought for a long time. Outside, the sun finished setting. The 3 moons rose into the purple sky. Finally, she spoke. Stay not as a weapon, not as a shield. Stay as my husband, and let us end this war together. His face did not change, but something shifted in his dark eyes, something that might have been gratitude or hope or love. He nodded once, and for the first time since their wedding, smiled at him. Gathered her full power for one final attack. Her fleet filled the sky above the imperial capital like a swarm of angry stars. 300 warships, 50,000 soldiers, every weapon she had collected during months of rebellion. The Empire's loyal forces were outnumbered 3-1. Generals told Emperor to surrender. Advisors begged him to flee. The situation was hopeless. But had a different plan. She stood before the War Council with at her side. Her voice was calm and clear as she spoke. Broadcast a message to both fleets. Tell them that the human called Death will fight for the Empire today. Tell them that anyone who attacks us will face the ending blade. The generals laughed. 1 man against a fleet. Even the human called Death could not stop 300 warships. He will not stop them alone, said. He will break them. And when they see what one human can do, they will lose the will to fight. She turned to, "Can you do this?" He looked at her for a long moment, then he typed on his tablet. "I can end the war, but the price will be high." "What price?" "Every life I take today will stay with me forever. That is the weight of the ending blade. It remembers." Felt tears forming in her eyes. She understood now. The sword was not just a weapon. It was a burden. Every death it caused left a mark on the person who carried it. "You do not have to do this," she whispered. "We can find another way." Shook his head slowly. He typed his response. "There is no other way, and I would rather carry this weight than let you die. That is my choice. That is my love." It was the first time he had ever used that word. Took his hands in hers. All four of her hands held his two. She pressed her forehead against his. "Come back to me," she said. "Promise me you will come back." He could not speak, but he nodded, and that was enough. The broadcast went out to both fleets. The human called Death would fight for the Empire. Anyone who wished to surrender could do so now. Laughed when she heard the message. She ordered her ships forward. She promised a reward to whoever killed the human and brought her his sword. Climbed into a small fighter ship. It was barely large enough for one person. It had no weapons, no shields, no armor, just an engine and a seat. Watched from the command deck of the Imperial flagship as the tiny ship launched into space. It flew directly toward the enemy fleet, alone. The first rebel ships opened fire. Thousands of plasma bolts and missiles filled the space around fighter. The command deck fell silent as they watched. The fighter did not explode. It danced through the fire like a leaf in a storm. It twisted and spun and flew in ways that seemed impossible. And then it reached the first enemy ship. What happened next would be told in stories for 1,000 years. The tiny fighter flew alongside the rebel flagship. Saw's figure emerged from the ship. He floated in space, protected by only a thin suit. In his hand was the ending blade, glowing with dark energy. He flew toward the flagship's hull and began to cut. The black sword sliced through the warship like paper. It carved through armor plates that could withstand nuclear explosions. It cut through reactors and fuel lines and weapon systems. The flagship split apart, its pieces floating away into the void. Then moved to the next ship, and the next, and the next. For 2 hours, one man waged war against a fleet. He flew from ship to ship, cutting them apart with surgical precision. He did not aim for crew quarters or medical bays. He aimed for engines and weapons and command centers. He disabled ships rather than destroying them when he could. But when ships fired on him, he destroyed them completely. By the time he finished, 63 warships were gone, broken into pieces, floating dead in space. The rest of his fleet had scattered, their crews abandoning their posts, their captains ordering full retreat. Herself was found floating in an escape pod. She was alive but broken. She kept whispering the same words over and over. He walked through space. He walked through walls. He walked through everything. Nothing could stop him, nothing. She never led another rebellion. She never spoke another coherent word. The war was over. Fighter drifted back to the Imperial flagship. Its engine was dead. Its hull was cracked. Inside, sat slumped in the pilot's seat, barely conscious. Ran to the landing bay. She was there when they pulled him out of the ship. His hands were burned. His body was covered in wounds. The ending blade lay dark and cold beside him, its hunger finally satisfied. She caught him as he fell from the ship. His weight was almost too much for her to hold, but she held him anyway. "You came back," she whispered. He opened his eyes. They were tired and sad and filled with the memories of everything he had done. He lifted his burned hand and typed on a small device strapped to his wrist. "I promised." Held him. She did not care that generals were watching. She did not care that her brothers were starring. She did not care about anything except the silent man in her arms. "I love you," she said. "I should have said it before, I love you." Smiled. It was the first time she had ever seen him smile. It changed his whole face, made him look younger, made him look human. He typed one final message. I know. The war ended. The empire stabilized. Followers surrendered or fled. Emperor lived 3 more years before passing the throne to his daughter. Empress ruled wisely and well. She kept the peace with Earth. She reformed the laws of the empire. She was beloved by her people. And always at her side stood her silent husband. Never spoke. He never carried the ending blade again after that day. He kept it locked in a vault, hoping it would never need to be opened again. Some nights would find him standing in the palace gardens, the same gardens where assassins had once tried to kill her. He would stand there in the moonlight, remembering, mourning, carrying the weight of what he had done. On those nights she would go to him, she would take his hand, she would lead him back inside. She never asked him to forget, she never asked him to stop grieving. She simply stayed with him, sharing his silence, sharing his burden. That was her love, and it was enough. Years later, historians would write about the war. They would call it the war that ended in silence. They would wonder at the human who could destroy fleets. They would study the ending blade and try to understand its power. But they never understood the real story. The story was not about a sword or a war or an empire. The story was about a silent man who chose love over hatred, who chose protection over destruction, who carried an impossible burden so that others would not have to. The story was about, and two people from different worlds who found each other in the strangest way, and lived the rest of their lives in quiet, peaceful silence. Together,